Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the death of George Floyd. Now, sadly, many of you may have heard about this. This has made the news big time. Of course, a video I believe, has gone viral on this of the cop apparently killing George Floyd. George Floyd was an African American man, 46 years old, and he had been apparently had died based on the video footage from a cop putting excessive force on George Floyd's neck for a very prolonged period of time. I want to say firstly that my condolences do go out to the family and friends of George Floyd. This is certainly a tragedy. It's something that should not have happened. This was, to me, I mean, from what I was seeing, it would definitely look like it was excessive force. I don't know if this was the result of discrimination or prejudice. There's speculation and conjecture, of course, that it may have been, but I don't know as far as definitively whether that was the case or not, but people have speculated that it could have had something played a role in this murder. And the thing about this killing, and the thing about the first thing I want to get at, this took place, I looked on wikipedia.org, and in the box where it lists like the basic information data for an event, it listed the event as 8 p.m. I'm going by the event in terms of the incident with the cop and George Floyd. The thing about, but wasn't officially pronounced dead according to the New York Times blog until 9:25 p.m. But I'm not going by that. I'm just talking about really the incident that led to his death. Now the thing, first thing I noticed, well, what I did was I used 8:10 as an approximate tentative time, speculative time, because even though it listed 8 p.m. in the New York Times, I'm sorry, on the wikipedia.org page where it lists that basic data, where I put the data on the right, they list the name of the person that died and the time and everything, and this and that. They listed that at 8 p.m. But if you actually delve into the blog on wikipedia.org, it said the police had responded shortly after 8 p.m. So I'm going to say that the time with the knee on the neck, that part was, I put it at about 8:10 p.m. And it also, to me, that time puts the ascendant at the event at 29 degrees Scorpio. And 29 degrees, I mean, you're talking about what I see in 29 degrees in astrology is that full culmination expression of that energy. And you're talking about it on the ascendant. And of course, sadly, could it have been a full culmination of very vengeful, sadistic energy? Very possibly. We don't really know this, but obviously very forceful energy. We're talking about Scorpio energy. And I would, and again, the fact that it puts it at 29 degrees Scorpio. The 8 p.m. chart had the event at 27 degrees Scorpio, but that again, on wikipedia.org, it did state, if you look at the article, the article or blog or what have you on there, that this did, that police had responded. This was shortly after 8 p.m. So I'm going to go with the incident, that confrontation, the physical aspect, putting that about 8:10 p.m. And 29 degrees in astrology, again, is a critical degree. It's a degree of crisis and upheaval, and you're talking about the sign of death and murder, Scorpio. So I do most ostensibly believe that this was at 29 degrees Scorpio. Now, delving more into the chart, this event chart. Another thing, I mean, that started, of course, as many of you may know, we had the Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn all in that conjunction. Pluto can be connected. Pluto was the first planet in that series of conjunctions at this time, and then Jupiter, and then Saturn. When you look at like a stellar, I mean, you break down the conjunctions in it, you break it down very systematically. You start out with the first planet, and then it ends with the end planet as far as the energy goes. Pluto being the first planet, that of course can be connected with murder and coercion, bullying, intimidation. Then you have followed by Jupiter. Jupiter can be connected with the law, And then you have Saturn in Aquarius, ending with this. I mean, this is a result, perhaps, people can see is very non-conforming, radical behavior by an authority figure. And sadly, and I'm not being flippant about this, people, just factual, the fact that you have Pluto and Jupiter in that mix in Capricorn, Capricorn does rule the knees. And this death took place, it occurred because the knee was on this person's neck for a protracted, prolonged period, sadly. Another thing that I noticed in the chart too, you did have you have a square, or at least a square between, at this time, Venus and Mars. Mars in Pisces and Venus in Gemini. When the police were reported to come to this scene, apparently, this is according to Wikipedia.org writing, that it stated that this was apparently because of some forgery accusation. Interesting enough, you had Venus in Gemini retrograde. And Venus, of course, can be about money. Gemini can be about forgery and a negative manifestation. Talk about the retrograde energy, adding insult to abject misery. That could be an indication of more, proliferation of forgery at this time. The fact that you have Mars making that square, well, he was stated as being intoxicated, or at least had some a certain level of alcohol that was in him at that time. And I don't know if this information has really been corroborated or not, if this was actually true, but this is based on what the report, what was, as far as the police, as far as the forgery, what was reported to them, and it was stated that he had some alcohol, and he may have been intoxicated. I don't know if he was intoxicated or not, but that's something that you'd have to confirm. But there was something on Wikipedia where it stated something about him, where it was at least reported that there was at least some alcohol in him at the time. Now, again, I think those things are likely going to still have to be corroborated. I don't know if that has been confirmed 100% or not. But going back to this, looking at this event chart, sadly, you're talking about, I'm looking at another thing that stood out to me. Of course, you're talking about the Mercury in Gemini energy. Sadly, Mercury in Gemini was conjunct the North Node in Gemini at the time. Now, I don't know if the death, I would say, presumably had something to do with lack of breathing, because it was stated that George Floyd was stating that he was pleading, please, I can't breathe, and you're talking about Mercury and in this event chart, Mercury in the North Node in Gemini, not far from the 8th house cusp. Now, that could be an indicator of a death that was associated with lack of breathing. But the thing about it is, the North Node is also about our future. That this was sadly something where, sadly, that destiny did occur. Or also, I should say, North Node in astrology can be about issues. When we're talking about it, like in transit, even electional astrology, it could be about issues that one may have to confront or address. You have in the sign of Gemini, sign of breathing. Then you have Mercury conjuncted at the time, so that even reaffirms that there was likely going to be some issue that was connected with breathing, and sadly in this case, lack of. And another thing too, the moon in the chart, in the event chart, the moon in Cancer was in the 8th house, so it's not shocking that this was a public death that sadly caused a lot of sentiment, a lot of strong emotions at this time. You also had a square between Neptune and Mercury, so that could, right there, you're talking about the thinking at this event was likely very, of course, very chaotic, to say the absolute least. Mercury in Gemini can succumb to, even though it's Mercury's in its dignity in Gemini, negatively manifested. It could manifest in confused or some kind of inner confusion. And of course, Neptune in Pisces, you're talking about chaos galore right there. And it's very sad that something like this took place, and it's something that really could have been sadly averted and avoided. And there's a lot of people that are calling for that cop that had the knee on George Floyd's neck to be charged with murder, and that remains. Obviously, the jury, so to speak, is going to be out on that. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that. I'm back. But anyway, well, another thing that I wanted to point out in this event chart was interesting was an inconjunct aspect that I saw between Pluto and Mercury. And when you're talking about inconjuncts in astrology, they can be about adjustments. You're talking about Pluto, the planet associated with coercion, with force, maybe even brutality, bullying. You have Mercury is the planet, Mercury being Gemini, especially Mercury is the planet of breathing. Sadly, when you have the inconjunct, you're talking about adjustments. It often can indicate too much of one thing, too much of something else. Well, in this case, sadly, I think this manifested in too much of the Plutonian energy about as far as the coercion, the bullying, the forceful energy. And then, and sadly, being Mercury and Gemini, that's making the inconjunct to, it was basically lack of being able to speak, sadly, on the part of George Floyd. And the thing about it is, and also as far as the breathing goes, especially Mercury being in its dignity in Gemini, I'm not being flippant as far as this, because I'm really saying that this is how I believe this may have manifested, sadly. And it's just a terrible, you're looking at this energy, and again, it's just terrible that something like this were to go down. And if this had anything to do with any animosity toward the man being of African American descent, then it makes it worse. And again, that's just a lot of that is speculation, conjecture, whether this was based on any racial hatred or not, or whether there's any bigotry involved in this crime. But it will. Obviously, those details may emerge. It might be something that may never be proven 100%, but people will still speculate on that. Well, I do have one more thing I wanted to say. I noticed another aspect I thought was interesting in this was the fact you have a square in this chart going from Saturn in Aquarius to Uranus in Taurus. And when you're talking about Saturn, the planet of authority, you have all this odd non-conforming energy possibly going. And Uranus is, of course, can indicate very shocking and erratic behavior. So you could do the math. It's not surprising that there was very unpredictable, unusual actions in connection with an authority figure. And also, if I remember right, Mars was in Pisces in the third house, so it shows at this time where the thinking might have been rational thinking may have been dominated by anger, and also anger that might have been where people might see this as unfounded, confounding, something where when you're talking about Mars and Pisces energy, sometimes that energy can manifest in just anger, where it's almost where you don't understand why that anger is even taking place, why the rage is taking place. And really also too in the chart, couple other things. Also, Neptune and Chiron were in the fourth house. The fourth house indicates the end of life. Pisces was on the fourth house cusp, and based on the 8-10 tentative speculative time I used, if I remember right, it put the fourth house cusp at 17. I believe it may have been at 17 degrees. If it was, that would be a critical degree. But I do know that Neptune and Chiron were in the fourth house, and Pisces being on the cusp of the fourth house by itself could be an indicator of an end of life that might be a little bit mysterious, nebulous, or obscure. We might not ever really know the full details as to why this actually went down, but I think the thing about, I mean, at least the full details, but and something end of life that's very confounding and confusing, and also having Neptune in the fourth house. Sadly, that's like can indicate the dissolving or dissipation of the latter part of one's life. George Floyd, I believe, was 46. The latter part of life may be perceived at around 50 years old and beyond. So he was approaching the latter part of life based on that. Chiron in Aries in the fourth house could manifest in actual physical wounds, suffering at the end of life, and being in Aries, ones that were maybe connected with law enforcement. So anyway, and ones that, I mean, of course, very volatile energy and turbulent energy, of course, as well. Well, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.